It is really hard to sell one ice cream cone. Once you get somebody to buy one thing, then you have the chance to, make them so happy that they come back. But getting someone to walk through your door is actually the hardest thing you will ever do as an entrepreneur. The definition of entrepreneurship is rebellion, is risk, is going your own way. You have to create a community of people to help you with things. So your job is actually just get good at what you love to do, whether that's ice cream or skateboards or whatever. You never start from nothing. You always start with your brain, brawn, and buddies, heart, spirit, soul, fire, right? In the business world, we downplay emotion, but it is literally everything. It's why your customers buy your product. You can start where you're at right now and build anything you can imagine. You just put your imagination to work.
We are going to talk about so many good things today. They're going to be tasty, they're going to be sweet, they're going to be healthy, and I'm so stoked. So I don't know if you want to kind of tell everybody what you're working on today, and then we can touch on what got you to this point.
Today, I'm working on a fiber company, dietary fiber. We take produce trimmings like apple cores and watermelon rinds and some other things, which are very high in dietary fiber, diverse fibers or different kinds of fibers, which your body needs. And we make them into products. Right now, we make a bar, like a nutrition bar, really tasty, really beautiful to help bridge the fiber gap in America, which I don't know how much you know about that, but it's a pretty big deal. 60% of us have one or more chronic illness, and most of those are actually related to diet. And a lot of those are related to the fact that 95% of us are deficient in fiber because the industrial food system removes fiber from our diets. So we're trying to add that back in, not just fiber, but diverse fibers, which feed your microbiome. So it's been the most fun, crazy new business to start. But as you probably know from some of your other guests, sometimes your businesses kind of just evolve and you keep going down the path and suddenly you have another business. It wasn't necessarily something I decided to start. It was just kind of curiosity. And now we launched this year, but it's been a 3-year project. And we launched finally in January of 25.
Cool.
And it's
and
going
what's
crazy.
The name of that company?
It's called Floura. Yeah, I should say that.
You might have. I just wanted to make sure we covered that. That's incredible. And it's not like a far cry because you've been in the food industry before, but it is a little bit different than what I know you for. So give everybody the context of why I'm fangirling right now and what Jeni is associated with.
Yeah, but so I spent 26 years of my life, from the time I was 22 years old, I left art school to start an ice cream company called Jeni's. I started in a farmer's market in Columbus, Ohio. I worked there for 10 years with 2 different businesses. And I started growing outside of the market in 2006, 2007. There's a whole story about that, but just started with this idea that ice cream could be a lot better and more interesting to people that were more like me, I guess, sort of creative, ice cream is such a beautiful platform to tell stories. And that's kind of what we did. So we started working with farmers and makers and just telling stories through ice cream. And here we are today, 20, almost 30 years later. And the company is not a tiny company anymore, but I think we have over 90 stores now, and we're in like almost 10,000 groceries, something like that.
Yeah. Yep. You can get it where I live. And I was telling you before, I had it, in a cute ice cream shop location, similar to just going to any ice cream shop, and then being able to buy it in the grocery store was so nice when I moved to the other part of the country. Like, oh, we can still get this here. Good. We don't have to go without. Because I think the connecting piece too in what you've created is even though it's ice cream, there's still a sense of intentionality with it, right? You're not just throwing out anything. I mean, you mentioned there's a creative process, but there's also kind of a health component to it as well.
Well, it is interesting. So I like to say that I built Jeni's or raised Jeni's like the way that you would if you were 12 years old and you just did it the way you thought everyone did it. So like I made everything from scratch. I found the best ingredients. I, did all of our own, we as a company did all of our own artwork. I mean, even when I was drawing the Marie Antoinette and sticking them on signposts or whatever, it was just like the most fun, beautiful business. But I also didn't realize how different we were until later, honestly. Then I started to realize, well, most ice cream makers aren't actually making everything from scratch. Most American businesses aren't doing it that way at all. And it's sort of interesting. But we made it work, and it actually ended up being the reason, I think, for our success.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you're doing things pretty similarly but different. I mean, obviously the product is different, but let's talk about some of those early things that you did. As an entrepreneur, you were starting in the farmer's market because I'm sure some of those patterns have continued on now. You start something new, you have a lot more wisdom to bring into this new iteration, this new business. Probably a lot of things that you didn't know. So just kind of take us back in the timeline a little bit of what really led to the success of Jeni's and what were some of the things aside from having that unique approach. I love that breakdown of build it like a 12-year-old that doesn't really know and is really coming from the heart and passion and wanting the best thing that they can possibly create. But yeah, let's just jump back in the timeline a little bit into some of those things you learned that you've actually continued on with in this business.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that in a way, business is they complicate it on purpose. They make it
Mm-hmm.
seem complex and complicated on purpose. And of course it is not, but you can't be an expert in all of those things. You have to create a community of people to help you with things. So your
Mm-hmm.
job is actually just get good at what you love to do, whether that's ice cream or skateboards or whatever, and your customers really understand and love them very much. And if you do that, then you can build your fellowship. So that was really like, I knew nothing about business. And actually, I thought I knew more than I did. And it was my strength. Because
Mm-hmm.
if I had known how hard it was going to be and how many failures it was going to take, like so many more failures than successes, I definitely wouldn't have done it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the advice that people gave me was always don't do it. It's too complicated. It's too hard. And, they looked at a 20 something, early, 21-year-old girl with pink hair, and they didn't see somebody who could get through it?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I mean, that was what I did. I had this idea that ice cream was about scent. Even an inexpensive vanilla ice cream is all about, the scent of vanilla, and the ice cream is a perfect carrier of scent. And that
Mm.
just was my sort of in to ice cream. I always loved ice cream, but that was my, you always have to have your into whatever, it is. And that was the thing that made me see it differently. And from there on, I just knew I could do it. I knew, I just didn't doubt. I had this vision that we could, there had been all across America to this day, there are beautiful heritage American ice cream companies that
Mm-hmm.
are, um, they've been there for a long time. They're sort of nostalgic. They've either been there since, the 1800s or the 20s or the 40s. But then there was like Ben and Jerry's, but nobody was really thinking about ice cream the way that my generation wanted to think about it, which is still the case today, which was like, but what about really beautiful ingredients? What about the actual ice cream, not just the chunks of something that you put into it? And so that was all I needed to create this vision. And then it was just, I was off and running. And what that
Mm-hmm.
looked like was I had to find money because I didn't have any money. I didn't have family with money. I didn't even have a family at the time. They'd kind of all broken up and been dispersed. And nobody was really there with me. I just had friends. So I was like, you never start from nothing. You always start with your brain, brawn, and buddies, heart, spirit, soul, fire, right? You've always got those things. And that was basically what I had. So I just started asking
Mm-hmm.
everybody for help. I found somebody that would give, that her parents had a little money, and she came in and they gave us some money, and I started this little company inside the farmer's market. And from there, I learned a lot of stuff, but it actually took me a long time to understand what I was learning.
Yeah.
And that
You
little
kind
first
of,
business was called Scream.
yeah, you needed the context for the information. I think sometimes that's the power of just getting started too, is we can read all the business books and we can study out and we don't even really know what we should be studying, especially if we're stepping into an industry. You have no family background. Like you didn't come from a long line of people who had ice cream parlors and understood that. And not only that, it wasn't just the delivery of this, it wasn't just the selling, it was literally the manufacturing. So with that, you had this beautiful vision, this concept of the smell and the experience of ice cream. Where did you even begin with making it? Like to be able to sell to multiple people and not just, your cute little batch of ice cream you make in your at home ice cream maker.
Well, I started looking into ice cream machines. And I lucked into, there was a local company, not an ice cream company, but a beautiful Italian market with this very old school, amazing chef. And he happened to upgrade his gelato machine. And I was able to buy a gelato machine from him, which is like a better piece of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not now because the American ice cream equipment has caught up with that. But back then, American ice cream was like very frothy. It was about 100%. Well, it's called 100% overrun, which means it's 50% air, 50%, the rest of the ice cream. And
Wow.
you couldn't really toggle with that much, and it would come out very soft. And then you had to have a hardening freezer because it wouldn't be enough to get it to be. It has to be like a below zero freezer in order to catch up with freezing such a warm. It's actually a warmer ice cream that comes out of the American ice cream machines. Italian gelato machines, they get it more frozen, so it's harder when it comes out of the machine, and it doesn't need a hardening freezer. All of
Mm.
that stuff, I had no idea. This was luck. I happened into it. I got it for $10,000, which is still a lot of money when you don't have money. And that was half the budget of the entire business. But that was what I lucked into. And I started making ice creams out of that. And it was better than anyone else because I was using a gelato machine to make American ice creams. I was using more butter fat. And then I was hardening it, which they don't usually do in Italy. And so I was getting this like really hard body, incredibly dense, beautiful ice cream out of this machine.
Wow.
And nobody was really doing that in America yet because it was before the gelato. It, shortly after that, we got all of these gelato companies coming into America, and there was this huge gelato trend like around 2000. But at the time, it wasn't like that. And so there was like one gelato machine in America, and I just happened on it, and it was in my city. So that was a
That's
huge piece
amazing.
of luck. So I learned how to do that. I learned how to make ice cream in that. But even that took 3 or 4 years. I mean, by the end of Scream, I was making really beautiful ice creams, but I still didn't have quite enough customers to make it a business. And I was also working all of the hours, which was
Mm.
insane. It was, 8 in the morning until 8 at night every day. And then I would have to go buy the ingredients, which I did not have a car for some of the time. I had a little scooter. Sometimes I would like drive somewhere, go get a friend to drive me somewhere, or literally walk to a grocery store, which was like 10 blocks away, and then carry, milk and cream and yogurt and stuff back that I couldn't buy in the market. And everything else I would buy in the market. So all of the strawberries and herbs and things like that I could buy there.
Mm.
So it
Wow.
was an undertaking. I mean, it was a lot,
Yeah.
but it was the best adventure. I loved every moment. It was crazy and wonderful.
So the vision is really what got you started and really had to carry you through. And at that point, I mean, I love this. I love working with entrepreneurs because I think that's one of the most important parts that you have to have is a really clear vision. You don't have to figure out how yet because that reveals itself as you go. So as you really honed in on that, did the vision shift? Like what would you recommend to someone? I think it's tricky too because we're even talking to people and they hear this and they think, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to do that." And we kind of have an entitlement generation, not to be rude, but it's just a little bit like, "Well, I don't want to really work that hard, but I want all the fruit of that." And so hearing what you went through, people might kind of think, "Well, I don't really want to do that." So what do you feel like kind of took you through vision and how did that have to shift to keep showing up for that? And what would you recommend to someone else who's in the starting points where they have an idea and a dream and it's a little, scary to start taking those action steps?
I'm going to riff a little bit because I got some
Yeah.
ideas based on what you have just said, which is so true and so interesting to me. I think we think right now that it should be easier because everyone makes it look easy. That
Mhm.
also is true of Scream. I mean, I made it look easy. That's our job. We always make
Mhm.
it look easy on the front, but back then we didn't have social media. So social media makes it look like it's easy to become a billionaire. It is
Mhm.
not easy to become a millionaire. It's not easy to make money. It's not easy to sell one ice cream cone to somebody. It is really hard to sell one ice cream cone. So
Mhm.
just remember that. We make it look easy, and that's the point because we're putting on theater. But behind the scenes, even in my new company, everything is crazy, you know?
Mhm.
And then the driver, the big driver, is not necessarily your vision. Yes, it's freedom. It
Mm.
is freedom. Because when you work for someone else, you are working for someone else. You are under their thing. And actually, I've learned that for a lot of people, that's safety. That's great. You know
Mhm.
what you're going to get. You go to work, you do this thing, and you go home. Not everybody needs the same kind of freedom that I need. So if you're that kind of a person who literally needs freedom and even can't follow the rules in the business that you're in, that you're working in, you might be the kind of person who can get through the brutality of business, of starting a
Mm.
business, because that was what drove me the whole time. It was an adventure and I was earning my freedom,
Yeah.
right? I was not working for somebody else. I was not under someone else's, whatever. And I could make it what I wanted it to be. And then I don't know if that actually answered your question. It was just like where my brain went.
Yeah.
But
No, I love that that's where your brain went. I don't even know what the question was. I
I
just
think it was something
wanted to
about
kind of,
vision, but yeah.
yeah, just how
Oh,
vision
yeah.
carries you through. Yeah. But it
So
sounds
the,
like it needs to be that deeper sense of what your incentive is, right? Like you wanted
yeah,
freedom, you wanted to build something, you had a clear vision for the business, and then you, in some ways, had a vision for your life of like, I cannot see myself working
I
for
think that
someone
has to
else,
come first.
building. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's the
then
intent.
it's a lens through which you see everything, right? So then
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, well, the definition of entrepreneurship is rebellion, is risk, is going your own way. Entrepreneurship, and there's different kinds, but if you go and take a whole bunch of money from somebody, you work for them. So that's a different kind of entrepreneurship. I don't know what that is. That's just business. But the idea is that if you're that kind of a person and you are seeing the world through this lens, which is every single room you walk into, every single piece of equipment in this room, every single thing in this room, everything you eat in here can be improved. Are you
Mm.
the one to do it? Do you have a unique, you know, perspective, talent, knowledge that makes you the one that's supposed to improve that thing?
Yeah.
Well, give it some thought and then take it down that road. Because I mean, that's how I look at the entire world. Every single day, every single moment. Why do they do it like this? Oh, that's, and oh, I don't know anything about microphones or I don't know anything about metal or whatever. So, okay, I don't know how to make that better, but whatever, but I can make this better. And I could, and then suddenly suddenly you end up hitting on an idea. And it's usually based on a whole bunch of things you've been thinking about and a pattern that you've created in the world. You hit on an idea that just kind of ticks a bunch of boxes. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, ice cream it wasn't just ice cream. In fact, it wasn't even ice cream. It was the fact that I wanted to be in a business where I was making something
Mm.
by hand. I was doing it. Pastry chef, something like that. I loved perfume. I loved scent. So I wanted to have something to do with that. I loved art. I loved storytelling. I loved theory and philosophy and writing and talking to people in service. And I was a big introvert too. So I liked being behind a counter serving people
Mm.
instead of networking and being, whatever. It was a whole bunch of boxes and I just knew it. The moment I thought of the ice cream idea, I knew it was me.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about visions, I see a lot of people like, let's go vision board it and whatever. I don't think you can really do that. I think you have to think of it like it's a lens through which you see everything. It's very personal. You can't be explaining it to everybody because they think you're nuts. You just
Mm-hmm.
have to see the world this way. And eventually you get to an idea that makes so much sense to you that you cannot not do it.
Yeah.
You are compelled to do it. And then the
Yes.
path begins to light for you. And you just
Mm-hmm.
follow that. Like you can't not do it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. I do a lot of coaching with entrepreneurs, and this is one of the things that can get tricky because when we hear vision, like you said, we tend to think vision board, and it gets very much into listing out all the hows and all of the outcomes. And what you just said nails exactly what I try and explain to people is once you can capture the whole essence of what you want and you really understand who you are, how you want to show up in the world, the comprehensive vision of what would bring you joy, you have no idea. There's so many things that have come out of right field for me that I'm like, well, I had no context for that, but it actually fits. It fits in this vision. It ticks these boxes, like you said. And I couldn't have even gone out there and figured it out myself that that's what I wanted to do or that was going to be the next right thing for me. But wow, it lines up. And so few people, especially even entrepreneurs, you'd think that this would be like we would be better at this. But I think we get so caught up in, ooh, that's a cool thing or the shiny object. And we lack that sense of grounding of what do I really want to contribute to the world? What matters to me? What am I not willing to do? What do I actually hate? I mean, even you being aware, I don't want to be out there front of house. I want to be behind the counter. I want to be creating, curating. That is such huge advice. If people take nothing else, anything from this interview but this, like, please start there. It is so crucial because everything else, like you said, starts to line up when you have that clarity.
And I had a coach one time who said, he's still my coach today, actually. This is years ago, but he said, when we first started working together, he said, he said, what do you want? And at the
Mm-hmm.
time, I really needed this coaching because I literally didn't know. It was right as I was coming out of Jeni's. And I really just didn't know what I wanted. And it took me 6 weeks to figure it out. And the way that I figured it out is the way that I realized the way I've always thought about things. I never ask what do I want. I don't want a car or a house or a, newspaper article or whatever. It's always been, how do I want to feel? And so you said
Mm.
joy. What brings you joy? I always wanted to feel inspired and activated every day. Those two words are constant in my life. Free. Those are constant since I was 5 years old. Freedom was a thing that I thought about and cherished. Going my own way. I mean, I grew up in a family that said this all the time to me, but it didn't resonate with my sister as much as it resonated with me. So I took that. And
Mm-hmm.
so even just a few years ago when I was doing this work, I went back to this idea of how do I want to feel? And from there, and at the time it was actually like, I want to feel peace. I want to feel safe. I want to feel love. At the time, I just didn't have that. And I was leaving Jeni's from the day to day and I didn't know who I was. And I was really upside down. So I just started with the simplest stuff. I want to be able to give love every single day and I want to feel it. And then I knew exactly what I had to do. Then I could figure out what I want and create a plan from there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting how emotional all this is. And yet in the business world, we downplay emotion, but it is literally everything. It's why your customers buy your product. So if
Yeah.
you're not in it emotionally, they're not going to feel that from you. It's why your
Mm-hmm.
team members are excited about working with you. And if you can't create pride in them, it'll never flow over the counter. That love doesn't flow over the counter and nobody will feel it on the other side. It is so much more complex and not in a business way, but in an emotional way than people will give credit to. And I think that's like the big secret. of how to
Yeah.
win, even in a super crowded market, even in American business when you start with nothing. That's really how you win. It's through emotion.
Yeah. Well, yep, that's that, guys. There's nothing else that really needs to be said. Just walk
Yeah.
away with that and go build $1 million business. No, really though, that is that you're speaking my language. Everybody who's listened to other episodes with me knows that that is absolutely the way that I see the world and how I see business, and it is the missing link. And I'm curious too, because you mentioned, I guess I realized I'd always done it this way, and I think I'm curious if your experience was similar to even how mine was, where you were being driven very heavily by how you wanted to feel. It sounds like you had done that work to really carve out that clear, I guess, aesthetic or vision of what you wanted. And then was it because you had success and because you got kind of caught up in it that then it was a little bit challenging to go back? And so you were in this more strategic brain and thinking, oh, okay, what do I need to do next? And disconnected a little bit from that emotional grounding?
That is really a astute point that you're tacking into because it's really true. I will say, I think this is like the fun part of life. I love to play characters. And I hope this resonates with someone who's feeling like, I can't do that because it's not me. I just put on a character and say, well, what would that person be like? And I say, well, she would wear this outfit and she would be confident and she would say these things. And I just come up with a character. And so what happens is that I would get amazing people in my life who would be helping and whatever. And I would say, I want to always earn my place at the table. So I'm a founder of this company. I work the counter for 10 years. I have something to offer, but what is it? And how do I speak to these people? Once we started to get like a real executive team, once we started to get financial partners, and it wasn't just, you know, me and this like small sort of doer team, hustle
Mm-hmm.
team, the sort of founding team. And it started to get distant. Like I wasn't helping customers every day now. I was going to meetings and I didn't like that necessarily. But now that we have a test kitchen and I'm no longer on the front line making an ice cream and listening to people directly. And so I started to just ask, okay, well, what does this company need from me now? Who can I be? So I started to get much more linear. And you might even think of it like some people might resonate with this, like going from feminine, which is like flow, pattern, bigger pattern, atomic patterning, to masculine, being like showing up with an idea, being more sure of myself.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't me. And I tried it for years and it wasn't me at all. And it didn't work, not just for me, but for anybody. So that was part of the like, okay, that was the wrong direction for me. But I had to do that in order to learn that my strength is to stay over on the side of flow, creation, generation. This is, being generative, always thinking about getting better. How can we make this better? And that's the feminine in business, the feminine. And by the way, it's not gendered. Every great business has both sides. It's just how we kind of
Mm-hmm.
say it. But if you think about of that sort of feminine side, the emotional side, the understanding, the always thinking about getting better, not and really even thinking about like in the moment of creating like a heritage brand, even though we were really young, how are we going to be here 100 years after I'm gone? I mean, that's a great project. It's that idea of birthing something and
Mm-hmm.
then letting it fly without you,
Yeah.
creating something that can live without you is such a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful thing. But anyway, yeah, in order to understand how powerful that was, I had to let it go in a way, go the wrong direction for me, then reflect on it and get back to it, which I did really over the last 10 years. I got kind of sidetracked and over the last couple of years gotten back to the beauty in that. And so now when I start a new company, I know exactly what I bring to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to be the things that maybe aren't going to serve me or the company.
Yeah. Okay. And I just want to kind of play on that too, because I love that you mentioned this really isn't about female, male, gender. It's about those energies because somebody could be a lot more masculine in what their skill set is and the way that they love. You articulated so well that very early on, you knew you were the creative, you knew you were the heart and the pulse. And there was just something really beautiful about what you wanted to build. Somebody else could come in there and be like, oh my gosh, I see this problem. I'm wired so much to just get in there and do the nitty gritty. Or I want to be the forward facing marketing person and I want to be, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so it's not that one is right or wrong, or if you're a woman founder that you have to be that feminine. It's just
not at all.
knowing yourself and what your strengths are and how
In
you
fact,
want
it's
to
fun
engage.
to go back and forth. I mean, you're going to do that
Yeah.
regardless. It's just where you're going to spend most of your time. And that's a really good point. I think it's really fun to think of it in kind of in this way because I think there's a spirituality to it. And that's a whole other thing. Founding a company is a very spiritual thing to do for me and for a lot of people, I think. But you are exactly right. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
understand where you're really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to, I mean, I always say that my favorite business book, people ask me my favorite business book, and I always say it was the Lord of the Rings movies because of that exact idea, because there's a fellowship in it. And if you watch those
Hmm.
movies, which by the way, were coming out right as I was starting Jenny's in 2001,
Wow.
and I had grown up with the books, loved it, always loved that hero's journey, but not just the hero, but putting together your fellowship. There's always a
Yeah.
fellowship, and everybody has a totally different way, and no one is perfect. Everybody has
Hmm.
faults and strengths. And some people are really big and bold, and some people are very soft and quiet. And sometimes those are the most powerful people, like Frodo, right? And so you put together this beautiful fellowship. And as a founder, your job is really to nurture the fellowship and make sure that it's what it needs to be and that it's safe and
Hmm.
that everybody on it is contributing in this very beautiful mosaic, becomes a mosaic. And
Yeah.
so it's exactly right. A company, I always love the word company. People who've ever listened to me hear me say this all the time. I like the word company better than business because business to me refers to the mechanics.
Hmm.
And you have to have people on your team that understand those things. You have to have people on your team that get law, that get logistics, that get all of the, data now. It's so much. But
Yeah.
there's seats for all of those. And then you come together as a fellowship. And then there actually is also an energy thing. So on that fellowship, you all have to be able to, I always see like the basketball. I'm not a sports person, but one time I watched a basketball game. I mean, I've watched a few basketball games, but one time I watched a basketball game and I saw the person just charging for the net. And without looking back, he bounced the ball back to his teammate. And I was like, that guy didn't even look behind him. He knew that guy was there. And that's kind of what it has to feel like on your fellowship. Sometimes you get people there who aren't serving the team or they're so talented, but then everybody feels weird around them or whatever it is. And, you have to create this fellowship where everybody feels like that basketball team, like you can throw the ball and that person's going to catch it. You don't even have to ask. They're there.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the goal. It's never quite like that, but that's always
Yeah.
the goal.
That's what you're shooting for all the time, pun
Hmm.
intended.
So yeah, and just on that note of feminine masculine, because I think it's so cool. You can call it different things, but I think the best businesses are both
Hmm.
equal. I think the best partnerships, the best friends, like even in humans, like you're always kind of balancing that flow versus linear, goal oriented versus over the horizon sort of thinking.
Hmm.
And so just kind of the more you start to understand yourself and others and teams and how they work and what's possibility in the world, you can kind of see those two sides, and you're always kind of like in this balance, like, okay, we're way over here now. Maybe we need to come back over here. So it's never, you don't want just heavy on one. And I will say, I think the business world, and I am using the word business world, is very, very masculine. I think it could use a little more
Hmm.
of the flow energy, the heritage brand
Yeah.
energy, as Simon Sinek says, the infinite game energy.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love all of that so much. I want to get into a little more of the masculine, if you will, a little bit of the nitty gritty, because I love that you captured that picture of what it looked like to recognize where you were and that you really needed to offload some of these roles and to build that company, to really build that fellowship. Talk us through a little bit about what some of the tangibles, the technical things that you did in order to facilitate really bringing together the right team and things that you would recommend to other people who are founders that want to shift roles and shift their responsibility and how they show up in a company.
Well, I'll go back to the beginning because I'm a start small and build entrepreneur. Like I didn't raise money for 15 or 20 years. So, everything was kind of bootstrapped, everything was SBA. So in the beginning at Scream, I was the only one. And I knew when I closed Scream and then when I finally had this idea to open Jenny's, and I feel like I worked out some of the kinks in a business plan and I opened Jenny's and it was a huge success from day one. I knew that it couldn't just be me because it was overwhelming. It was too much. And also there was no way that I was going to get above. And now they would say work on the business, not in the business. But I didn't know those things yet, but it was kind of what I was
Hmm.
thinking. I was like, I need to get to a place where I can be more visionary. And also I just need help. If we're going to grow into a viable company that's long-term, obviously I'm going to need some help. And so I thought, well, who would it be? Who do I need? Probably operations person first, maybe then finance, because you really, and they're similar. So, you can find somebody who has kind of both sides of that. They really work well together. And in fact, even at Jenny's right now, we're not a small company, but our chief financial officer is also our chief operation officer because,
Mm.
and at Floura too, because they're so related. So that was kind of going to be the first hire. Marketing was going to be then kind of after that, and maybe some leadership after that. But like CEO kind of thing, I was thinking I didn't really want to be the CEO necessarily. Although I don't know if that was a mistake. I think I would have changed that now. But what I did back then was, okay, this is just how I made my business plan and how I thought about it. How much money do I have to make every year to hire that person? What does that salary look like? And literally how many human beings do I have come up to this counter, buy ice cream, buy one ice cream cone in order for me to 3 years from now be able to afford to have somebody who helps me with operations and,
Mm.
logistics and things like that. Because the hardest thing you'll ever do is just to get someone to buy your one thing. It's it that, once you get somebody to buy one thing, then you can get somebody to buy two things, or, you can build from that. But just like getting new customers is really, really hard. And then you have the chance to, make them so happy that they come back. But getting someone to walk through your door is actually the hardest thing you will ever do as an entrepreneur. So understanding it just from that point of view, even if you're a bigger company, how many ice cream cones do we have to sell? How many new customers do we have to have here in order for us to fill this one seat?
Mm.
And so that was how I did it. I was like, well, then great. That's the goal.
Yeah.
That's where we go. That's where we're going.
Mm.
And so then it was, I brought in people. That was the early days. I wouldn't consider them like executive team sort of people. Those were just, they were people. We all worked hard together. We had a website. We had some major press, New York Times, and at the time it was Daily Candy and Martha Stewart and all these, like, at the time, really big Food Network we had been on a couple of times. And so we started to sell a lot of ice cream on our website, and that enabled a lot of press, national press, because now you could buy the ice cream nationally. So then we
Mm.
became kind of this, I mean, we had more press than, I can't even believe how much press we were doing, something so fun and different. And also, I think for some of the coastal press, it was really great to have a middle of the country story. So we were really lucky, which gets back to also this, or it gets to this idea that wherever you are, there are strengths. If I
Mm-hmm.
had started in New York City, I would have been swallowed whole because I didn't have the money to stand out. But in Columbus, Ohio, I could be really important and, serve people, and people really, and, loved it.
Yeah.
Not that it was easy. The
Oh my
first one
gosh.
failed still. It wasn't like, but once I started to really understand that and
Yeah.
then get national press and then grow from there. So yeah, by the time we had, a big shipping operation, we started selling in restaurants, we started selling in grocery stores then, and starts rolling.
Cool. So did the COO, the CFO, did that role come in before that massive expansion happened? Because I can imagine, I know we've kind of skipped a little part in there where you went from doing the farmers market to actually taking this to the next level, and having that bigger distribution. So I know we could get into all of those little phases, but what did it look like? Because I think sometimes there's a fear to figure out those numbers and know how to invest, but that's the very thing you need for the expansion. So did you recognize you wanted this to go bigger? You needed those people, not just so that you could step back and change roles, but because you saw the vision being, this is something that needs to be all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that in the moment that I first envisioned ice cream. I mean, the
Mm.
moment that I first made ice cream and realized that it was about scent and we could do storytelling and that it could be not just in the nostalgia lane, but actually there's like a new kind of ice cream company where people like me when I was, um, could go on dates and have fun and have better lighting than the fluorescent lights at all the other ice cream shops, like a pretty place. This is before Instagram, but it was still like a time where there was more of a craft sort of idea. This is mid 90s, but going into the 2000s, it was still ahead of its game, but it was where everything was going and still is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea was from the beginning, I just didn't know how to do it. So now you might think like you have an idea, you go get money, you launch big, which almost never works anyway, but still it's different than, starting small and building very slowly. I still had this big vision. I thought it would go a lot faster. I didn't know how many people it would take or how much money it would take. I didn't know any of that stuff. I thought it would go faster. And of course it didn't, which is great because that was how I learned how to do it actually. And that was what gave us our big advantage. But yes, what had happened actually is we had to have a an offsite. We weren't allowed to make ice cream inside of the market because we didn't even have walls. It was just a stand in the market. We weren't allowed to make ice cream in there and sell it to someone who's going to resell it. We can sell it over the counter, but we're not allowed to package it,
Mm.
sell it at a restaurant, and then have them resell it or grocery store. So we had to have a bigger kitchen, and we had the Ohio Ag Department. And this is a little bit more complex, but just anybody who's kind of starting anything like this, a CPG company or starting from a restaurant to a CPG, you will find that you can make your salad dressing in your restaurant or whatever, and you can serve it over the counter, and that's governed by the local or county, the city health department. As soon as you want to package it and sell it off-site to be resold, then that's the state ag. And if
Mm.
you're shipping over state lines, now it's the FDA. And actually, I think anything sold in stores really is under the purview of the FDA, which is a whole different thing. But in order to satisfy those things, we had to have a kitchen that was more of a plant, like a professional plant. So we built that, but that meant we had to take out a big loan, bigger than we'd ever taken out. It was like $250,000, which still sounds ridiculously small. And with that money, I think it was 250. With that money, we actually opened another store because we
Mm.
knew it wasn't enough to have just the market shop. So it was our opportunity to open another store. We didn't know if anybody outside of the market even knew who we were. It was terrifying. So we built this kitchen, we built this store, and we had a line out the door from day one. It was the coolest thing ever. And now we start growing, and I start realizing we can get better ingredients because now instead of just going to the market, we can go directly. We can have people growing strawberries for us, growing vanilla bean for us, getting direct and fair trade chocolate and things like that because we're growing. We have more volume, and that's what they
Mm-hmm.
required. So at that point, yeah, then we were like, okay, and we knew we were going to grow, but we just didn't, we weren't quite ready yet, but we started. We were like, okay, well, we started. So then I decided that we would hire somebody to kind of manage the business. The first person we hired did not work at all. It was actually awful. And then we kind of were looking for somebody, and we ended up hiring a CEO and somebody who was like probably too big for what we really needed at the time. But he was with us for a long time. And that was sort of just a whole new era of the company.
Mm. Yeah. And that's kind of what you needed to be able to reach that next level because I can't imagine you still trying to be running every single piece of that. You have to really know the time to
Hmm.
step into the visionary role. You did mention, though, when you were talking about this a little while ago, you questioned sometimes whether that was the right move to not make yourself the CEO. What about that? What would you recommend to somebody who is a founder and maybe hears you say something like that? Or maybe they didn't catch it and I did, but I'm just
Hmm.
curious. What are the things that you know now that you didn't know then that might have changed that decision?
If I had known what I know now, then it's not even a statement on him at all. It's on the person who was the CEO. I would have first hired a business advisor and coach.
Mm,
And I ended up having one of those. He's now my business partner in my new company, Floura, because I think it's not that complicated, to be very honest. Everything is complicated. Everything is hard. It's not harder than anything else that you're doing.
mm-hmm.
You have to learn to be a leader. And going from being a founder to a leader is a different thing. It is different. It also can be very difficult. And I think long term, founders should consider hiring a CEO. I think long term, that's better for the company because, founders can't be fired. And so we need to have accountability in our companies. But I would have hired an advisor and a business advisor to help me understand business better, the actual business workings. And then I would have been a better partner to that CEO, I think,
Yeah.
is a very good way to put it. I also would have hired a great lawyer early, and I didn't do that. So I think if I ever could say the three things that I think if you're on the precipice of growth as a founder who's not a business school founder, which I think you agree with, I think founders should focus on all of the stuff that they're going to make, whether that's tech, skateboards, burritos, ice cream, or other services or, heart transplants or whatever it is. You need to know that technology. You need to know that skill, that thing more than anything else. And then you bring in people who know the other things. But if I was going to say the three people that I really would have hired at that time that would have really helped me would be a coach, an advisor, and an attorney, a really good attorney, because I needed to know all this stuff. But instead, I was like this trusting Midwesterner, like, okay, cool, we'll hire you and I'll just be able to be over in my corner, do my thing. And that
Mm-hmm.
was probably a mistake for me. I wanted to know more. I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to learn. And I'm a very fast learner. And it sort of then put me in the corner and I didn't end up learning as quickly as I think I could have. And I had to kind of fight for that. And then that became complicated.
Hmm. That is such powerful advice. I think anybody who is hearing this and is in more of that founder mentality, being able to understand it's like hiring anyone, right? You don't need to know how to do the job perfectly, but you need to understand the context for how that job should be done. You need to really have that bigger picture so that you know if they're doing it well. And so
Yes,
if you leap
exactly.
right into hiring someone, it's not that you give away power, but you give away a little bit of that understanding that you need even in the founder role to grow the business to the next level because you need to have some understanding and some of that needs to come into your playbook. So I think that's pretty
Uh,
sound
if you
advice.
have if you have an idea that's working, that people love, this is happening at Flora too. You get an onslaught of people who want to work with you.
Mhm.
Like they're coming to you. And sometimes you're like, okay, great. That's awesome. Wow, this person came to us. And it's not a great idea. Sometimes it works, and it's even worked for us a bunch of times at Flora. So, you just have to weigh it. You have to decide. But sometimes it can actually be really bad. Because there's always a good sell of why you need to work with this person. And sometimes when you're the founder, you're like, wow, this person wants to work with me. This is so cool. I must be like doing something right. And so you bring them on. And I have had that happen many times where it was just a bad decision.
Mm-hmm.
They tend, they take advantage of the situation. They, they're just there for the money. They're just there because they want the idea. And it's really a lot of ego involved in that too. Like they want to take credit for what you did. There have been many people along the way, even now, like, there are just, that's what happens. If you have a good idea, people come for you.
Mm-hmm.
Money comes after you, talent comes to you. And it's always a good idea to do a process. If you're going to hire somebody, go find the right person for your thing. Don't just hire the person that's like in your life or near you or whatever. It may end up being them,
Mm-hmm.
but at least you've gone through it and you knew what was out there and you chose that person for this reason. And just going through that process is important, I think,
Yeah.
especially when it's a big
Well,
role.
right. So I guess kind of like one of my final last questions, and we didn't really know we were going to go in this conversation. It's been such a fun deep dive into what you've learned as a founder. You're, founding again, you're building a new business. Just to kind of finish out this thought that we've had, what are some of those tips that you recommend for founders who are hiring that executive team, they're hiring the CEO? How can you maintain and really build a strong partnership? Because you said understanding the business logistics a little bit more would have made you a better partner. So what does that look like in both roles?
Communication and honesty, because your goal is trust.
Mm-hmm.
When trust breaks, and sometimes it breaks and it shouldn't have broken, when trust breaks, everything in the company will break.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to put everything into that. So being a person somebody else can trust, and then bringing people in who understand and value that deeply so that there's no manipulation. And if you are a founder and you feel like somebody's manipulating you, because I can tell you, founders are usually a little naive when it comes to certain business things, will never be as educated or as lawyered up as the money people ever. We will never be
Mm-hmm.
able to compete with them. You got to have a good lawyer on your side because of that. But like, if you feel like somebody is manipulating you, and that happens all the time, and it scares me and I don't like it, get a radar for that because it's
Mm-hmm.
usually right. It's usually true. And I would just say that that's where like you hire for people who have this kind of integrity that want to come in and be over communicating and want to explain things to you and really want you to learn everything that they know and they want to learn what you know, right?
Mm.
I want a CEO who wants to learn every single thing that they can from me about ice cream. They'll never know everything, but they're going to learn everything they can from my brain so that when they're making decisions without me in the room, which of course they will do all the time, they are making it from in the right way, and there's a lot of detail.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to have a back and forth partnership, a true partnership. And that's really true. I think I just go back to like honesty and really it's about trust. Because if you have an organization that's about trust that flows out into the world, you have no idea how much your customers can feel whether you're an organization that is an organization that the people inside of the organization care about and
Mm-hmm.
believe in and have faith in. So
Yeah.
anyway, for me, it's just like, if any of that is broken, you got to fix it right away. You can hire coaches for it. You can just have a direct conversation, but it'll get broken. Always does. But if you can get it back, that's the most important. If you can't, you got to move on.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Jeni, for sharing just the really beautiful story of you building your first company. I mean, I know there's more than one in there. There's some failures, there's some pivots. And then even now into Floura, it's so fun to be able to hear the founder story from you and the things you've learned. There's so many people listening who I know are probably a lot like you. They want to build something beautiful. We talk a lot about the strategy and, the masculine side of business and what we need to do to really focus on the KPIs in business, but this is such an important conversation that also needs to fit in there so that if those who are a little bit more creatively driven, feel like they're doing it wrong, they've heard this and can hear, yeah, that there is a path forward for me. I can focus on the values and the things that matter the most, and it will be successful. It will be profitable. So I
Well, and
appreciate
I
your
would say like
story.
KPIs and all of that, that's like 10% of what you do as an organization. The
Mm-hmm.
rest of it is actually serving people, making stuff,
Yeah.
building a team, building a fellowship. Like it's really like you have one meeting a week where you talk about, did we make the goals? And then you're back into like, how do we inspire and activate people? How do we get people moved? How do we do this? So you don't hire for KPIs. You don't
Mm-hmm.
create a business for that. You have to have people who know how to get there, but you also that's where it is. It's that spaghetti, the bowl of spaghetti between point A and point B,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're going to go to the meeting. You have to tell what you guys accomplished this week, but at the same time, you have to actually do that work. And that's where you
Yeah.
spend 90% of your time.
Mm.
So, yeah. And I just want to say to your listeners that I believe in you. You can do it. This is the coolest, most incredible adventure. It literally is. in my mind, the definition of the American dream, what America is built for. And you can start where you're at right now and build anything you can imagine. You just put your imagination to work.
Mm-hmm.
And you can start at any age. You can start when you're third grade or 90, whatever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. I was going to ask any final parting words, and you just gave it.
That's
So I
them.
appreciate that. Thank you so much. So, where can people go if they
Thank
want to
you.
connect with you? They can obviously go check out the brands that you're launching, but yeah, any place you want to send them.
I mean, I'm just at Jeni, Jeni on Instagram. I'm pretty active on DMs. If you need anything, I'm always there, always talking on the DMs. That's like my big Instagram, where I end up spending most of my time on Instagram, I feel like.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jeni. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And it really has been a great, really fun conversation.